Okay, picking up at slide number 11. Simple meter. So the subject of this chapter. Thus far, in this chapter number 3, we have chosen to indicate the beat with notes without dots. Okay, remember back in chapter 2, we talked about compound division and we used dots with that. So in this chapter, we're not talking about that. We're actually going to save that for the next chapter. In this chapter, we deal with meters in which the beat is divided into 2 equal parts, aka simple division. And these meters are called simple meters. Okay? We're going to put that into action in just a little bit. We're going to practice this. But for right now, let's move on to slide number 13. So, simple meter, right? Let's look at our graphic here with A, B, and C. We saw this back on slide 10. So look at A, right? The one with 3 as the upper number and 4 as the lower number. We could also just say 3, 4. This is an example of triple simple meter, okay? B, this is an example of quadruple simple meter. So for B, what do we see? We see a 4 as the upper number and an 8 as the lower number. However, for quadruple simple meter, we might, or actually more often, we're going to see 4, 4 like this. So either of these, 4, 8 or 4, 4 are both quadruple simple meter, okay? And then for duple simple meter, we see example C as an example of with 2 as the upper number and 2 as the lower number. That's an example of duple simple meter. However, 2, 4, as we see here, is also an example of duple simple meter. So both of these, 2, 2 and 2, 4, are examples of duple simple meter. Okay? So keep that in mind as we move forward here. To slide number 13. Here we go. So before we practice these things, let's talk a little bit about a couple other symbols that you might see. So if you see kind of this fancy looking C that we're looking at on slide number 13, that fancy looking C is another way to indicate 4, 4 meter, right? This one here, one of these quadruple simple meters. So if you see that kind of fancy looking C, it just means 4, 4 time, okay, or 4, 4 meter. And it's also called common time, okay, because 4, 4 is really the most common meter that we are going to run into in this class and throughout your music career. Probably. Okay, so then if you see a C with a line through it, right, kind of like this, that's also called cut time, and it's another way to write 2, 2 meter, right? One of those duple meters. Okay, so the C, that fancy looking C, is not an abbreviation for the word common, as it's often supposed. Instead, it's actually a holdover, kind of a vestige of rhythmic notation system called mensural notation. That was common back in the medieval ages, like in the 1200s through about 1600. So kind of the late Middle Ages and throughout the Renaissance. We're not really going to talk about that anymore. That's really a subject for more of a music history class. But just, interesting fact there. Okay, moving on to slide number 14. So now let's put a little bit of this stuff into action. So let's look through the songbook, which is in your book, Music First, right? Starting on page 236. So let's open that up to page 236 here. And what I want you to do is find 3 examples of each of these simple meters that we're talking about. So let's start with duple simple meter, right? What were the duple simple meters that we talked about? Remember, 2, 2, and frankly, more commonly, we're going to see 2, 4. Okay, so let's look through our songbook here, see if we can find any examples of duple meter, right? Either 2, 4 or 3, 4. Okay, looking through, don't see any yet. And okay, page number 240, I see a song called Billy Boy. And I'm just going to circle this meter here in red so you can see it better on this video, hopefully. Right here is my 2/4 meter, right? So that's an example of duple simple meter. Now, I also noticed on the next page, the Kaisan song, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I see another example of duple simple meter, right? I see this one's 2/2, right? So that's another example of duple simple meter. So you could use those 2 songs as your answers here, Billy Boy and the Kaisan song, for examples of duple simple meter. Now let's move on to triple simple meter. So for triple simple, what are we looking for? We're looking for anything with a something that looks like this, a 3 and a 4. Okay, that's going to be triple simple meter. So let's see here, go back a page. Do I see anything? No. No, not yet. Okay. Move forward. Oh, here's one. Cantamus hymnum. So here's an example of triple simple meter. Actually, here, let me circle this so we can see it better. So my time signature or my meter signature, always at the beginning of the song, 3/4, right? That's an example of triple simple meter. So you can use that one and then find a couple others on your own. Now for quadruple simple meter, remember one of my quadruple simple meters, most commonly we're going to find this one, 4/4, less commonly 4/8. Okay, but those will be quadruple simple. So let's look here. I see Go Down Moses. Here's one, page 248. I'll circle that meter. Here it is here, right? So there's an example of quadruple simple meter, 4/4. So look for a couple more of those. And one thing about this, hey, if you find one that has either a 6, a 9, or a 12 as the top number, you can't use that for this because those are going to be compound meters, right? So if we see one here, we see down in the valley has 9/8, right? So 9 is the top number, and that means it's going to be compound meter. So don't use that for any of these. All right, so pause this video, take a little time, find some more examples of these simple meters, and then we'll move on to slide number 15. So slide number 15. Now we're going to practice some of these rhythms. So remember, okay, so we're going to practice duple meter rhythms first here. So for duple meter, remember we have a 2 on the top. And the 2 tells us that we have 2 beats per measure. Okay? And the bottom number, the lower number, 4, indicates what kind of rhythm gets 1 beat. So remember, if we have a 4 on the bottom, that means a quarter note gets 1 beat. So in this example, in the first measure, actually I'm gonna number these measures here up top here. So we see that we have measure 1 here, and measure 2 here. So here, in measure 1, I have a quarter note and then a quarter note, right? So remember, because of the 4, my quarter notes get 1 beat. So I'm going to count this as 1 and 2 and. All right, and then of course I have 8 notes here. We're gonna clap on each of these 8 notes, 1 and 2 and. Okay, let's practice this example here that we see on slide number 15. So it's gonna go, okay, we'll go slow. How about ready, go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay, so I clapped on, for the first measure, I clapped on beat number 1, right? And then I clapped on beat number 2. Here's beat number 2. And then, but I still count the ands, right? And then for measure 2, I clap on all of these 1 and 2 and, because I have 8 notes now. And I keep my counting 1 and 2 and very steady. All right, so practice that on your own, and then let's move on to slide number 16. Let's practice some more of these. So for slide number 16, we see 4 examples here. We see example A, example B, C, and D. Let's look at example A. Okay, so for example A, how many measures do I have for example A? I'll write it down. You think about it. Okay, so we have 4 measures for example A, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that's example A. So we're still doing duple meter here. So we're still counting 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, right? Every measure is 1 and 2 and, right? Because we're dividing the beat, because this is simple meter. And we're using simple division. And when we say and after each number, that means we're dividing the beat. Let's practice A with clapping and counting. Here, I'll start you off here. So we'll clap with me. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and repeat. 1 and 2 and 1, 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So don't forget the repeat signs as well, right? Those little dots that we see at the beginning and the end. Okay, now let's look at example B. So example B, we have a dotted quarter note to start with, right? So I'm talking about this right here, dotted quarter note, and then an 8th note. So in measure 1, that's what we have. So remember, our dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats. So we're going to count this as 1 and 2. And then on the and of 2, we have an 8th note. So you have to clap here as well. So I'm going to clap on 1 and the and of 2. All right, let's actually try that. Let's just do the first measure of example B. So we'll go ready, go. 1 and 2 and. Okay, so I clapped on 1 and then I clapped on the and of 2. That's what you should do as well. Now, look at the next measure, right? Measure 2 of example B. What do we have here? We have the same exact thing as measure 1. So let's do measure 1 and then let's immediately do measure 2. Okay? Here we go. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. All right? So that's how those dotted rhythms work with the 8th note. Now let's practice the entire example B. Don't forget the repeat signs. Okay? Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2 and. Okay, so that's example B. Practice it with me in the video, then practice it by yourself, okay? Get good at these for your, so you really understand it for yourself. Now, let's look at example C. So example C, they throw a quarter rest at us right at the beginning, right? So for example C, here, right, there's my quarter rest. So remember, for the quarter rest, I'm going to count, but I'm not going to clap, right? So we have 1 and 2, right? Beat 2 is when I start clapping. Notice I have a quarter rest here on beat 2 of the third measure. So we're not going to clap there either, but we are going to count there. Okay? So remember, with rests, we do count, but we're not going to play or clap on those. So, example C, let's do it. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 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 1, 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, right? Don't forget the repeats. Okay, finally, let's do example D. So example D, what do they put in here that's a little bit new? They put an eighth rest at the beginning of which measure? What would you say? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Well, it's at the beginning of measure 2, right here. So for this one, I'm going to count 1 and 2 and then when I get to here, right, with my eighth rest, I'm going to count 1, but I'm not going to clap. I am going to clap right after, though, on the and of 1, right here, because I have an eighth note. And then I'm going to keep going. 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay, so let's practice example D. Here we go. Don't forget the repeat signs. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2 and. Okay? So practice example D with me and then practice it on your own. All right, and then, okay, after you practice it like this with me and then on your own, then you can open up the link on slide number 16 here and practice with this recording, okay? In fact, maybe let's try a little bit of that right now. Here we go. Okay, we'll go 1. So we'll go actually 1, 2, ready, go. A, 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Repeat. 1, 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. And then B. 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1, 2. Repeat. 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1, 2, and so on.